Assalamu alaikum dear students, and welcome back. Today we are going to explore how to write a scientific report. And since you are the students of science, you're students of computer science and information technology, so this is a very important lecture for you, and it will help you out in your final year project, and it will be a game changer session in terms of your upcoming research journey and your research, you can say that adventures. So in this lecture we will first of all review the purpose and the qualities of scientific writing, and after that we will look at the component parts of the lab reports, because you have to generate lab reports as well. And in terms of the lab report, we will look at the structure and the format, the tentative structure and the tentative format of generating a lab report. And we will explore the writing process of creating those scientific reports, and we will consider the best approach to writing the lab reports. And I'll show some examples of the strong student writing, so that you can get a better idea that how actually you should be writing your scientific reports. Now what usually happens is that students they often write shorthand. They use those mysterious and non-comprehensible vocabulary, and they do this to sound scientific and objective. And this is the first mistake, or this is the first fallacy that the students face. And then they focus on the facts and details rather than the analysis. Now the analytical skills are usually weak in students, and they try to imply the analysis and reasoning without making the argument explicit. So without argumentation, without developing their argument, they tend to imply the analysis and the reasoning, and they assume that the reader will read meaning into the text. So they sometimes use the jargons, they use the vocabulary without keeping this in mind that the readers can be sometimes the non subject specialists, or the people who may need some explicit understanding. And then the students, they ignore the problems in usage, the problems of spelling, the problems of grammar, and the problems of punctuation. And the English teachers, they are always running after them, highlighting and correcting their spelling, grammar and punctuation mistakes, but the students, they always tend to do these kind of mistakes. Now before we move into the formats and the structures of writing a scientific report, let's look at the 5 C's of technical communication. You must have studied the 7 C's of communication in your communication and presentation skills, and some of them you will find a repetition of those C's as well. So the first and the most important thing in technical communication is the clarity, because if your message is not clear, if you are unable to convey your message with clarity, then the entire activity of communication, it goes useless. So clarity is the first and the foremost important C, or component of the technical communication. Then the second one is conciseness. Conciseness means being to the point, and in maintaining the linguistic economy, using the least most words, conveying the maximum message. That is basically called the conciseness. And then it should be the message, or the information, the concepts that you are explaining, that you are expressing in your technical document, they should be having concreteness as well. Concreteness means that you should be using the substantial data. It should not be hollow, and it should not be full of verbosity. And then all of the segments of the information, all of the chunks, all of the components, or all of the ideas that you are incorporating or mentioning in your report, they should be coherent. Coherent means that they should be logically connected. There should be a logical connection, there should be a logical flow of the narrative or the document. And then the context should be kept in mind, because if you are not keeping in mind the context of communication, then sometimes you may add or include information or include certain you can say that components of language that may are not required there. Now let's move towards the lab reports. And in lab reports, first of all, we will look at the component parts, and then we will talk about different the structural aspects or different aspects of structure. All right. Okay. Now these are the basic components of a lab report. First of all, you need to have an abstract, then introduction, then you need to talk about the methods that were used during that lab report, that lab work, and then you need to talk about the results. You need to generate discussion, and then finally you need to move towards the conclusion. Now this is the order in which you read and ultimately write the lab reports. And this is not you can say that this is how it is written, this is how it is documented, but this is not the order in which you write it. Now abstract is it comes at the beginning of the report, but it is always written at the end. Once you are done with all of the other things, then you write the abstract, right? So this is something that you should keep in your mind. Now this is the typical structure of a report, whether it is a scientific report or academic or lab report. First of all, you need to have the title page, then the abstract or the executive summary, then the introduction, then the methodology, experimental methodology or the research methodology. Then you need to give the findings and the results, then you need to do the analysis of the findings and the results, and you need to generate discussion, and then based on that discussion you need to give the summary and the conclusions, and then based on that summary and conclusions you need to do the recommendations, and then by the end of that you need to mention the references or the bibliography. And if there are certain proformas or certain you can say that formats or questionnaires that are used, so you need to you need to mention the appendices there as well, right? So this is how it is done. Okay, now let's talk about the component parts one by one. In introduction, we usually talk about, we usually mention the background and the objectives of the study, and we need to talk about the scope and the limitations of that study, and we need to mention the previous work, the previous researches. Now, in introduction, we mention the background and objectives so that the reader is clear about the significance and about the importance of that work, and we need to mention the scope so that the reader can relate that with the real world, and we need to mention the limitations. By limitations, I mean that we need to clearly mention that how much portion of that problem or that issue you are going to solve. And then the purpose of mentioning the previous work or the previous researches is to basically align your contribution with the existing norms or with the existing culture of research in that particular domain or that particular industry. Then you need to mention the methods, and in methods you need to talk about the procedures that were followed in that report, and what were the materials that were used during the conduction of that lab work. And then you need to mention the results, and in results you need to mention the data. The data is presented in the form of tables, in the form of figures, the calculations are mentioned, and then you need to generate the discussion. And while generating the discussion, all of these findings, the results are linked to the introduction, and then the interpretation is done, and if there are some alternative explanations according to the hypothesis or the research questions, so all that is done in the discussion. And then finally the researcher gives the conclusion is basically the summary of the main points. And then at last the references are mentioned, which is by references we mean the sources that are referred to in the report. Now, as far as the structure of a lab report is concerned, you cannot change the component parts, but you can make these component parts like the abstract and the introduction, literature review, and data collection methods, research methodology. You cannot change them, but you can make them interesting and readable by focusing on the internal structure of the sections. And you can determine the way these sections flow together to make your writings lucid and to make them coherent. And you also need to keep a watch that what is the information that is included and what information is left out, and which information is basically emphasized. And you should although you are not allowed to use the literary language, that flowery and flamboyant, attractive kind of catchy kind of language, you have to use the academic language. You have to be very formal, and we can say that you have to use the academic jargons, which are usually considered very boring and very rough and less attractive. But in any case, the challenge is that in report you have to basically tell a story. As far as the writing process is concerned, you have to start with the data, not with the introduction, because first you need to have the data, and you'll start playing with the data, you'll start exploring the data, and eventually you'll be able to come to a point where you can write the introduction. You have to start with the data, and then you have to narrow down the data to a few figures. Maybe initially the data will be in the form of a whole, you can say that, lot. And then out of that data that is in abundance, you have to select. Let's say you are working on computer sciences, on computers, so you'll find that there are like hundreds of parts in computer, and even if you select just one aspect, like if you are selecting motherboard, so in motherboard you will find there is again a bulk of data. So out of that, then you have to select a few figures, you have to narrow down the data, and then you have to assemble assemble the components of the data into a storyboard. And then you have to find the trends in those figures, in those segments, or those chunks of data that you have selected. You need to find the trends in that, and then you have to find the one thing that ties them together. And then you have to tell your readers how to read your figures and what the main point of your data is. Then finally you have to map out the story that tells what the main point is, right? So this is how generally it is done. Now then once you are done with that, once you have explored the data, you need to start with the methods and results section, and then you have to connect the results with how you got them. And then you have to connect your interpretation of the results, which is basically the discussion, to the scientific assumptions or the principles, which is basically theory. So this means that the theory or the principles that you followed, that were the underlying principles of all of your research inquiry, you need to link your discussion, you need to link with your findings or your conclusions with that theory. And then basically you have to connect what you set out to do, I mean your introduction, to what you found. So introduction is your beginning from where you started, and conclusion is basically the lighthouse, your discovery or your achievement. So you need to develop a connection between your introduction and conclusion. Now we will talk about the key components of your research work in detail, and we'll look at that how you should be actually going through these portions. Now the introduction of your research, it basically states the objectives or the purpose of the experiment, and it provides the reader with the important background or the theory to the experiment. So in introduction you basically need to talk about as I already told you, you need to give the background of that study, and you need to link your understanding with the theory. Then these are the writing prompts, or you can say that these are the questions that you can ask to yourself in order to write your introduction. Let's say you can ask this question to yourself that what kind of problem did you work on? What kind of problem that was that you worked on? And then why did you work on this problem? What is your rationale? Why did you opt that problem? And then what should the reader know or understand when he or she is finished reading the report? Like, what is the significance or what is the benefit of reading your report? You should mention this as well. Now that is a run-on sample written by a student, where the student has talked about the purpose or the significance or the scope of the research. I'll just read it, and then in the coming slide we'll have a revised version of this as well. The purpose of this lab is to observe the conservation of momentum and energy in one dimension in a real life setting. We will study this concept through the motion of carts colliding on a track. The velocity for one or two carts will be determined before and after their collisions. Now this is a sample written by a student, and this is the revised sample, because here the writer is the student is using will, the study will or will be. Now here the purpose of this lab was, so this means the lab was already conducted by the student, and now the student is writing the report after conducting the lab work. So that is why it should be in the past form. The purpose of this lab was to observe the conservation of the momentum and the energy in one dimension in real life setting. This concept was studied through the motion of carts colliding on a track. The velocity for the one or two carts was determined before and after their collision. Right now, how to incorporate the statement of the purpose in introduction, and how it should be reflected in conclusion. Now this is how it can be done. Like, you can say that overall this lab was a success. The purpose was to observe the conservation of momentum. Now this is the statement of the purpose that is included in the conclusion. The purpose was to observe the conservation of momentum and energy in one dimension in a real life setting. The study of this concept was accomplished through the motion of carts colliding on a track. In addition, the experiment determined the velocity of one or two carts before and after the collision. During the course of the experiment, the conservation of both momentum and energy was noted, and the final velocities of the carts was accurately determined. So this is how you can incorporate the statement of the purpose in your conclusion. Now, as far as the theory or the theoretical framework or the conceptual framework of your research is concerned, these are the prompts, or these are the questions that you can ask to yourself. Like, which research questions did you set out to answer? What are your research questions? What is the mystery that you are going to solve? And what was your expected answer or assumption about the outcome of the investigation, which is basically in the form of, like, what was your hypothesis and what is it that you are designed to prove? And then you need to relate the assumptions to your findings as well. Now, how do you select the method of your research? In order to select the method, you need to have accurate and complete account of what you did in the lab and what materials you used. Okay, and most of the times it follows usually follows a chronological structure, and it is written in the past tense. Now these are the prompts, or these are the questions that you can ask to yourself in order to you can say that in order to answer these questions. Number one, you need to ask these questions: that how was the experiment designed, and on what subjects or materials was the experiment performed, and how were the subjects or the materials prepared, and what machinery or you can say that equipment was used. And then you need to ask this question to yourself, because it's you who is carrying out all of that research. You need to ask this question to yourself, that what sequence of events did you follow as you handled the subject or the materials, or as you recorded the data? Because in your research inquiries, this is the most important thing to do, because if you are conducting a research, or if you are carrying out a research, you need to clarify this, that what your method was, because without mentioning the method, it is very difficult for a researcher to justify his or her stance. Now, as far as the selection of the result section is concerned, you need to first present the data, then you need to state the data in verbal form as well as in the visual form, like it should be in the form of the sentences, and then you need to add certain graphs, certain tables, certain charts, diagrams, etc. And you need to use the sentences to draw attention to the key points that you have included in your graphs, in your figures, etc. And the most important thing, which usually the students they forget to do, is that you need to number and title the tables and the graphs, because if you have not added any numbers or titles to the graphs, so it would be really difficult for the reader to make a picture or to make a sense out of the data that you have presented in your research paper. And then you need to use the appendix for the raw data or the complex calculations if there is something that is mind-boggling and you don't want to confuse the reader. You can include that in the appendix section, and if there is a bulk of you can say that raw data or the proformas that you use to collect the data, you can attach them in the appendix section as well. So these are the prompts, these are the questions that you can ask to yourself for results. What are your results, and is the data presented so the results are clear, logical and self-explanatory or not, and what is the main point and what ties the results together. In discussion section, you show that you understand the experiment beyond the simple level of completing it. So the purpose is not just to complete the research. The purpose of the doing the research is to basically understand all the nitty-gritties, all the top up and bottom down you can say that concepts or intricacies of the research. So it's not just running a mile and making it to the other side of the rope. It is basically navigating and understanding all the basics, all the micro and macro you can say that aspects of that body of research that we have conducted. Now what you need to do is that you need to basically explain, you need to analyze, you need to interpret the data, and then and only then you need to say this with this confidence that yes, I have conducted the research. Now as far as the analysis section is concerned, so these are the prompts that you can use, like what do the results indicate clearly, and what are the sources of error, and how do the results they compare to the theory or the hypothesis. And after an analysis, you need to do the interpretation of the analysis. Now this is where mostly the students they do mistake while they are interpreting the data. They go for the generalizations, and then it is really difficult for them to justify themselves. So in interpretation, these are the prompts that you can use, that what is the significance of the results and how do you justify the interpretation, and you can suggest some improvements for the future researches as well. In conclusion, it is in the lab reports, the conclusion is usually short, and it states what you know as a result of the lab, and there is no new information. So this is a sample example. You can just stop the slides here and you can read it. What you need to do is that if I just culminate all of this discussion, so first of all you need to do the planning, and at the planning phase you need to identify and determine the purpose of the research. You need to brainstorm, you need to do the mind mapping, you need to make an outline. Then you finally begin with your writing process. Once you are done with writing, you need to revise it, and if you are satisfied with the revision and you feel that there is no further room for the improvement, you can finally go and submit the report. So that was all for today. If you have any questions, you can use the comment box to raise your questions, and I'll be very happy to answer your questions. Otherwise, you can note down your questions, and you can come to the class, and you can ask those questions from me as well. Thank you for listening to me so actively and attentively. See you in the next class. Allah Hafiz.